Hey y'all, I'm Taryn from the Remote Yogi, and I'm trying a new thing. So I've been really into watching a lot of Bake Off lately, and I miss baking. One of the things before I started traveling that I really enjoyed was baking. I used to have lots of house parties back when I was like a wife and lived the suburban lifestyle, and I loved baking. And since I've been traveling, I haven't done much of it, and I haven't done much British baking at all. And I've been fascinated watching the British Bake Off. So it was my goal this winter to spend more time in the kitchen as I'm back at my parents' house. And I asked my audience, I said, hey, would you guys like to see me attempt baking as I talk about some of the coaching lessons and some of my insights? And you said yes. So here I am trying this out. We're gonna see how this goes. I also asked the audience what they'd like to see me bake. Multiple people said scones. I love scones, so I'm happy to make scones. I'm doing it according to the British Bake Off recipe. So I will add the links down wherever you're watching this. And we'll see how it goes. I've never made scones British style before. I've made American scones, which are a bit different, it sounds like. So yeah. Okay, so I realized after filming this, when I went to edit it, that the audio is terrible. I got a brand new mic, and the audio really sucks. So I almost scrapped the video until I remembered that it was a video on perfectionism. So we're keeping the audio for both videos that were recorded this day, and you just get to deal with the funky audio. Know that what I'm saying is good shit, and hopefully you can get over the fact that it sounds awful. The topic we're going to be discussing today is perfectionism. I thought that was a really great topic to start with. It's one that a lot of my coaching works on, and we actually talked about it last night in my group coaching, so it's fresh on my mind. And as this is the first video of me baking, I thought I should preface it with an understanding that I'm human. I'm not a baker. This is not actually about the bake. It's just kind of happening as I talk. And understanding that like releasing perfectionism is what allows me to hop on camera, do these things, build a business, and just totally change my lifestyle because I stopped caring so much about being perfect. So we're gonna be talking about that today. I'm making scones. I'm also going to be making some lemon curd and raspberry jam to go with them, which I have made before. It's been a while, but I've made those before. But we'll see if this becomes 2 videos or 1. I really have no idea. I just throwing this out there and we're gonna try it. And we're good to go. So I'm going to start sifting things. I've got my recipe over here. Yeah, and I didn't find a sifter at my parents' house, so I'm just using this. Again, like releasing the perfectionism and just letting it go. Yeah, and just wanting to really talk about the reason perfectionism is such a big deal, and it's a problem. Because I think perfectionism is one of those things that's kind of like, it's almost like a badge of honor. It's like the same thing as saying like, oh, I'm so busy all the time, and how we use that as a badge of honor. I'm so busy. We do the same thing with perfectionism. Like, oh, I'm such a perfectionist. We like say it like, it's my weakness, but really it's not, because it means I'm like really good at my job because I pay attention to all the details, and I, really work hard, and like, yeah, that's true. That's like something that happens sometimes when you're a perfectionist is you work harder. Usually you work more than you need to. That's a thing. But also, we don't realize how detrimental it really is, because when we're a perfectionist, we tend to stop being creative. We tend to overwork ourselves and then burn out. And, especially as somebody who's more of an entrepreneur, when we're a perfectionist, we either never get started because it's never right, it's never perfect, or we're like cramming things into the very last minute. This happens at work a lot, right? We're like waiting till the very last minute to turn things in because we want to make sure like we get the very last detail in and it's perfect. And then when somebody has something nasty to say, we might take it really personally, right? These are all things that can happen through perfectionism. But we also don't realize the way that this impacts our personal lives. So when we're perfectionists at heart, we tend to hide more of ourselves away from the world, right? Like I want to present this facade that I'm perfect, so no one like really questions me, and I fit in, I belong because look how perfect I am, right? These are kind of the thoughts that are subconsciously going through our mind when we're perfect. So what can happen with that is we get into romantic relationships with people who don't really know us deep down. They might know like a glamorized version of us. Ooh, stove's on. And then in our friendships as well, we can have shallow friendships because we never go deep enough. We don't allow people to see our flaws, which can be a major problem. And then I'll also just talk to entrepreneurs out there, especially if you have a personal brand or you're like a content creator, influencer kind of thing. When we show up perfectly all the time, we think it creates more trust, but it doesn't. It actually creates bigger barriers. So when I see someone and I think that they're perfect, I think that their lifestyle is like unattainable. I don't feel like I relate to them. Whereas if they show up and they're like, here's all the things I'm doing that make me awesome, but also here's the things I'm doing that like show me fucking up and that sort of thing. That to me is a much bigger trust indicator, and I want to work with people who are showing up like really authentically like that. It gives me way more trust for them. And like you relate better, right? Like when I post things about me being like a goofball and me messing up in life, people relate to that a lot more than they relate to me being like, here's my perfect life and here's how I never mess up, and that's all lies anyway, and we can see right through that. So it's good to show up perfect, or it's good to not show up perfect. It's good to be human. My entire podcast, Embracing Human, is just that. It's about really releasing the need to show up in some kind of perfect way. Okay, so now I'm just gonna chop up this butter and try to mix it in with my hands. I know you guys, if this is something you baked before, might disagree, and you might tell me to use a mixer or a food processor, but I'm following the recipe on Bake Off, so, if it's a mess, that's okay. I'm trying not to be perfect. So I briefly want to explain to you like how perfectionism really messed with me in my own life. If you guys know my story, you've probably heard me talk about this before, so I apologize. But for those of you who are new, one of the ways that I really struggled with perfectionism in my life was because, I grew up pretty religious, and, we were always told at church that we want to be the most like Jesus that we can be, right? And my little brain was like, oh, Jesus is perfect, therefore I need to aim for perfection. And that's kind of where that whole motion started for me. And then, you're in school, and we get good grades in school, and that's a positive thing, and there's like a perfect score in school, and we want to aim for that. And, all these different things started to condition my thinking that like, it's better to be perfect. I also grew up acting, so I learned pretty early on how to be someone I wasn't, right? I knew really quickly how to act like somebody else, and so I used that to my advantage. And the way this kind of worked out in my life was I felt like I had to show up as the perfect student, and I had to like be perfect for each friend group I hung out with. So I started to do a couple things. One, I really overworked myself to overperform in school, which was stressful. And then I also would hide parts of who I was depending on the friend group I was hanging out with. I found that my friendships were more shallow. I didn't feel as deeply connected with people. To this day, like there are a few deep friendships I have that have lasted like a lifetime, just because I have just kind of hidden away parts of who I am, and that's really hard to relate and connect with people who aren't showing up as themselves fully, right? And then just trying to keep up with that perfectionism in school was exhausting, and I'd play this perfect student at school, and then I would go home and like get drunk or drink or like do drugs or whatever I was doing as like a way to cope with the fact that it's exhausting trying to keep up with perfectionism, because it's not real, and you'll never ever get the outcome that you want because perfect is not achievable. So this was happening to me. We fast forward, I get through college, I do all the things, and I'm still trying to like lead this perfect life. I have this belief that if I just show up perfectly enough, I will be worthy of love, I will have the success I want to have, all of these different things. And what ended up happening is I, got through college okay, I got married, and then as I got married, I was really obsessed with this notion of like the perfect wife. And so I worked my butt off to be the perfect wife. I read every blog post, article out there. I was doing all the things. I was exhausted, and as I was exhausted and doing all the things, I was constantly telling myself I wasn't doing enough, right? Like I wasn't keeping the house clean enough, I wasn't budgeting well enough, I wasn't cooking well enough, I wasn't baking enough, I wasn't hosting enough events, like whatever it was never enough because I had these super high standards for myself. And what else was happening is I was comparing myself to like all these people online, right? So I was comparing my baking to professional chefs on Instagram. So I was comparing my ability to like maintain my household with those of like stay-at-home moms who weren't like trying to run 3 businesses while working full-time, right? Like I had all these things that I was comparing and doing, and it was just exhausting. And the worst part of it was I really thought that if I just show up perfect enough, I'll naturally excel at my work, and my husband will love me forever, and I'll never have any problems in my relationship. Funny enough, it was part of my perfectionism that tore me and my husband apart. So if you know me now, I'm divorced, and that was for the best. And what was really painful during that time was he would get frustrated by my desire to want to do all the things perfectly. It made him feel judged on his own inability to be perfect, and it just separated us a lot. And I thought, this should make him love me more, and it actually created bigger walls between us because we could no longer connect. I'm just like kneading in this cold cut butter. I don't know if I'm doing it right. And then after I left the marriage, I think that like shattered my own belief about being perfect, because now I'm like a divorcee, and my life was kind of falling apart compared to the standard I had in my own mind. And so that really helped me to release it. And then honestly, like entrepreneurship is what really further helped me to just release all those notions I had about what it looked like to be perfect, what I needed to do to be perfect, because it was really like an impossible task, and that became more obvious the more I learned about business and just putting myself out there and being relatable and that sort of thing. So now I get to teach people about perfectionism and the things that we want to avoid. I don't know what I'm supposed to be looking for, what this is supposed to look like, but I'm just going to say that's fine for now, and I'm going to whisk some eggs and buttermilk. I reread the instructions, and it's definitely supposed to be more crumbly, so I'm taking my time here. I think also doubling the recipe, it's going to make it more time consuming, but thankfully this is a really like mindful activity, so we'll be doing more about like stress and anxiety relief, but this is a great way to do that. At least for me it is. All right. So let's talk about like ways to check into perfectionism in your own life. So one of the ways I do this with my clients is we determine where the perfectionism comes from. Now, typically we have a combination of all 3, but what I've learned is that perfectionism really stems from 3 different categories. And that is like self-imposed, socially imposed, and high standards. And like I said, these can kind of mold and blend into each other, but again, it's about finding like where these thoughts come from so we can start to change the story. So when they are self-imposed, that's usually something that's really easy to figure out because we have people around us all the time saying things like, why do you have these standards for yourself? No one else, cares. No one else is expecting this of you. And especially like at work, like no one's expecting you to stay till midnight getting things perfect. And you're like, I know, but it's all on me. And a lot of that comes from issues with self-worth. So when we don't feel very worthy, then we're going to constantly be trying to show how worthy we are by how well we can show up with our perfectionism. This was a lot of my stuff, right? It's also really easily indicated from our comparison. So when we're comparing ourselves with other people, we're going to have a lot more of that like self-imposed. It's all like kind of in our own head, what we think people expect of us, what we like, it's our own belief system really, which is good because we can kind of start to break that down when we do more self belief work and self-worth, which is a lot of my one-on-one coaching. So that's one that's like usually the case for a lot of people, is they can go, oh, okay, like this is all on me. I'm doing too much social media comparison. I don't really have enough self-worth yet, and that's just things that we can work on. And that's an easy, well, it's not an easy fix, but that's something that we can definitely grow through and grow out of. This is part of the directions that I have no idea. It says something about using a rounded, brown-bladed knife. Is that what this is? I don't know. To make a fairly soft but not wet dough. This is going to make it wet, so I don't know what that means, but we'll figure it out. So yeah, so that's self-imposed. The other big one that I see, and this is kind of where a lot of mine stemmed from originally, is the socially imposed perfectionism. So this is when we have taken on belief systems or ideas that our culture or societal programs or whatever feed into us. So again, this is something that happens at school. We have a lot of that belief around, like there's a perfect score at school and it's better to get a perfect score. And so it starts to create this like false belief that there is such thing as perfect and we can like aim for that. And if you don't aim for that, then you're kind of shamed on a little bit in some ways. This does not look very wet. It could also be like things that your parents have said or people that you look up to. They appear perfect on the outside, so then you try to follow that. Or they've actually said things to you throughout your life about like needing to work harder, aim for more, to be better, that you need to like earn your value in life or whatever. It can also be like a work culture thing. So in my coaching program, we've got a military gal, we've got a nurse, and those are environments where like there are high stakes at work, right? So it can feel like we need to be perfect because like the work calls for that. And sometimes in those environments, especially at the military, like there can be like a really nasty culture where like if you're not doing good enough, you're kind of yelled at and not treated nicely. So it can create this really strong sense of pressure that like, yeah, you need to be perfect or show up perfectly. I don't know if I'm supposed to do this with my hands, but going at it. Yeah, and then the last one would just be like the judgment. And that is usually related to high standards. And high standards might be your own, or they might be something that you picked up from your parents or, whatever. But the high standards one is a bit harder to separate from because we often don't see it. So I always give an example of a gal I was talking to who was sharing with me, she feels like her perfectionism is getting in the way and she wasn't connecting with friend groups. She was in a new country and it was hard to make friends, and she's part of all these mom groups. And she said, it would feel like the moms would, what was the word, how did she phrase it? Like they weren't connecting with her, and she thought it was because, maybe her daughter always came looking really nice and cute, and it made them feel bad because, her kids were always put together, and she was always put together, and that's just because it's something she enjoys, and, but she felt judged from the other moms for, being this way. And I asked her, well, do you feel like the other moms could do more to make sure their kids were looking really cute and put together? And she had a funny reaction. She was like, well, yeah. And I told her, okay, well, that's part of the problem, right? It's that when you believe in these high standards for other people, you tend to have them for yourself or vice versa. Even if you think that, your high standards are only for yourself and that, other people can do whatever they want, deep down, that's not true. You always kind of feel frustrated. You always kind of feel like people are letting you down. Your expectations are always, are not ever being met. And I'm probably over-kneading this. Help, I don't know what I'm doing. So that's just another major thing that can happen is you're always kind of let down. That's a big indicator that maybe your high standards for yourself and other people are causing major issues in your life when you feel like you can't rely on anyone, everyone always lets you down all the time, you're always letting yourself down. Like, that sucks, right? Like, we're all human. We all want to have space to be human. And that's just a thing to be aware of. I don't know, it says to knead the dough for a few seconds, so I think I overdid it, but it's still looking very clumpy. I don't know. Anyone know? Is this how it's supposed to look? Does this look good? Some kind of lumpy thing here? Awesome. Lightly flour your fingers and the worktop. Oops. Okay. Lightly. I don't know what lightly means. I think this is lightly. Okay. For a couple more seconds until it looks slightly smoother. Then press the dough out until about 3 centimeters thick. I don't do centimeters. I don't know about y'all. Okay. So I should probably get a rolling pin. I don't know if I have a rolling pin. I'll just keep, it says press it. I'm guessing that's with your hands. Anyhow, so yeah, that's the like 3 major categories with perfectionism. Is it's self-imposed, it's like socially imposed, or it's like caused by some kind of like high standards for yourself and other people. And the reason we want to figure that out is because once you are able to recognize your patterns of perfectionism, you can start to fix it by seeing where the stories came from. So if you've got, you know, socially imposed perfectionism, you can look back at those stories. When did that start? When were you first kind of fed these beliefs that you needed to show up a certain way in order to be worthy, or, you know, that sort of thing? Also, I'm realizing I have no idea how thick 3 centimeters is. I'm gonna get a measuring tape. See, like normally I would just be like, that looks about right, but I literally have no idea what 3 centimeters is supposed to look like. Huh. That's thicker than I thought. Guys, send help. Tell about 3 centimeters thick. Okay, so that's like half of that. So if I spread it out too much, do I just like clump it back together? This is gonna be so overworked. That's fine. That's fine. I'm smashing this back up. You know what? I did forget that I had to measure this earlier, which is 6 centimeters. So it's about half of this. Would have been smart to remember by now. Cool. So that's like pretty thick. Okay, so here's the thing with perfectionism. These might be a little bit tough. It's fine. We can just slather more toppings on them, and I'm sure it'll be fine. And yeah, so then I'm just gonna cut these out. Okay. See, it tells you to like gather the trimmings and press it back together for another round. So I'm guessing that like me kneading it twice is fine. Probably not a huge deal. Okay. All my baking friends watching, don't be judging me. Okay, sweet, beautiful. I'm gonna throw these bad boys on a baking sheet and put them in the oven. Okay. It also says to slightly dust the top with flour. I don't know what that looks like, but we're gonna try. All right, so here they are. And they're gonna go in the oven. Okay, well, I think I measured them decently enough. There was a tiny bit of dough left, and I got 15 instead of 16, so they're probably a little big. All good. All right, so I'm gonna let those cook, and when they come out, I'll share them with you, and I'll share with you a couple more thoughts on perfectionism. But I decided this video is already pretty long, so I'm gonna do a different video. It'll come out in a couple days for the curd and the raspberry jam. So now I just let those guys bake and make this other video. Okay, so the first set is ready to come out of the oven. See how this goes. Oh, okay, they don't look bad. Okay, I'm guessing they're not supposed to like slide sideways like these ones did, but hey, all good. Throw these ones in. Ooh. Literally, some of my scones are like, I bet they taste fine. Okay, check out this. I don't know if that's supposed to happen, but hey, it smells really good. I'm sure it's gonna taste really good. And this is about my, like I used to be I would have been so embarrassed by this a few years ago. I would have been like, oh, but now I'm like, that's funky. I like it. I like that it's different. It's imperfect. Really well fitting for today's video. Let those dry, let those cook. All right, y'all, so my scones are definitely not perfect. I'll show you them in a second. So here are my scones. They're a little bit misshapen, some of them. I don't know. Are we supposed to like tap the bottom of them, or? I think they're okay. I don't know. My British friends will have to tell me. This is one of the really lopsided, funky ones. But hey, all good. I'm just finishing my raspberry jam. So I ended up doing a separate video for the raspberry jam and the curd, and in it I'm talking all about routine, how to change up your mindset with creating routine, so definitely go check that one out. I accidentally broke a scone when I was pulling them out of the oven, but I added some of the lemon curd on top. I'll have a little bite. I think I nailed it. I think it's really good. So kind of just wrapping up some of the thoughts around perfectionism, we want to think about, first off, how it's not very helpful. So reminding yourself that while we think perfectionism is helping us get new places and helping us show people like how smart we are and how hard workers we are and all these things, it can actually be to our downfall because we end up having burnout, we never feel good enough, we're constantly comparing ourselves to other people and judging ourselves, and we can never do as great work if we're like beating ourselves up and judging ourselves, right? Like who works in a good environment, or who works well in an environment where they're like constantly feeling berated or made fun of or any of that, and we do it to ourselves. So just a reminder that perfectionism is not real. You can't aim for perfect. You are human. You are amazingly human. And with that, we're all going to have flaws. We're all going to have weaknesses. We're all going to have things that we don't do well. And that's okay. It's learning to like not care about the things that you're not as good at. And then, know that you're amazing and you do have things that you're a badass at, and celebrating those things. And then if you want to dive deeper, you can start to explore where your perfectionism comes from. So is it something that you do to yourself? Is it something that your culture or your society has kind of placed on you, and you can start to do the work of identifying those beliefs and changing them? Or is it your own high standards and the judgment? And is that separating you from other people? And with that piece, it just comes down to like witnessing and forgiving yourself and forgiving others. And it's a little bit more of a slow process. These are things that I work on in my coaching programs. We go through all of these steps and how to clean them out. So let me know if that's something that interests you. But just know you can breathe, you can relax. Know that when you release your perfectionism, you can actually go further because you're being kinder to yourself. You're actually getting things done, whereas perfectionists tend to never have it right, so they never get started, right? Like if you want your business to be perfect, you're never gonna get started. And just giving yourself space to have faults and let that create closeness with other human beings, right? We connect in ways that reflect where we struggle, right? We all like have this collective struggle, and that is a way we bond a lot more than feeling like, oh my God, you're so perfect, I want to be your friend. Like that, it doesn't really work as well. We don't feel that same kind of connection. So releasing the perfectionism, know it's one step at a time. Be kind, be gentle to yourself. And if you like this video, you want me to do more of them, let me know. Comment down below what you enjoyed. I'll add the recipe and everything. And I'll see you guys on the next video when I finish the jam and show you all about the lemon curd as we talk about creating routine. bye.